On our anniversary, my wife revealed she's pregnant by my brother, shattering my life. Our third wedding anniversary was supposed to be a celebration, a reminder of everything we'd built together. I had planned a romantic dinner at the same restaurant where I'd proposed, a beautiful spot overlooking the water. I spent the entire day thinking about how far we'd come and what the future held for us, our dreams of starting a family, buying a house, and building a life that we could both be proud of. But the evening didn't go as planned. Sarah seemed off the moment we sat down at the table. She was quiet, fidgeting with the edge of her napkin, her eyes avoiding mine as we made small talk. I noticed she wasn't drinking her usual glass of wine, instead opting for water. It was strange, but I brushed it off as nerves. Maybe she had a surprise for me, something that was making her anxious. I couldn't have been more wrong. When the waiter left us alone after taking our order, I reached across the table to take her hand. She hesitated before letting me, and the moment our fingers touched, I felt the distance between us like a physical barrier. Something wasn't right. "Jason," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes finally met mine, and I saw the fear, the guilt, and something else I couldn't quite place. "What is it?" I asked, my stomach tightening with dread. She took a deep breath, her hand trembling in mine. "There's something I need to tell you, something I've been keeping from you." My mind raced, trying to piece together what she could possibly be about to say. Was she leaving me? Was she unhappy? Had she lost her job? 100 possibilities flashed through my head, but none of them prepared me for what came next. "I'm pregnant," she said, her words hanging in the air like a bomb about to explode. Pregnant. My heart skipped a beat as I processed what she had said. This was supposed to be good news. We'd talked about having kids before, and I knew we both wanted to start a family soon. But why did she look so terrified? "That's amazing," I said, my face lighting up with a smile that quickly faded when I saw the look on hers. "Wait, why are you telling me like this? What's wrong?" She pulled her hand away, wrapping her arms around herself as if trying to shield herself from the truth. It's not yours, Jason." For a moment, I didn't understand. The words didn't register. "Not mine?" I blinked, trying to comprehend what she was saying. Then it hit me. Like a punch to the gut. "What?" I whispered, my voice cracking with disbelief. She looked down at the table, unable to meet my gaze. "It's not yours," she repeated, her voice trembling. "It's your brother's." The room spun around me as I tried to grasp the enormity of what she had just confessed. My brother? My brother? I couldn't breathe. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I had ever experienced. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, rage, confusion, hurt, all crashing into me at once. How could this happen?" I stammered, my voice barely audible as I tried to keep myself from shouting. "With my brother? Sarah, what the hell?" Tears filled her eyes as she shook her head, guilt and shame written all over her face. "I'm so sorry, Jason," she whispered. "It was a mistake, a horrible mistake. I never meant for this to happen." I stood up from the table, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. I needed air. I needed space. I couldn't sit there and look at her, not after what she'd just told me. The evening that was supposed to be a celebration of our love had turned into a nightmare. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about my marriage, had been shattered in a single moment. "I need to go," I muttered, my voice shaking as I grabbed my jacket. I couldn't be there anymore. I couldn't face her or the truth she had just dropped on me. I can't do this right now. I walked out of the restaurant, my heart pounding in my chest as I stumbled into the cool night air. My thoughts were racing, my emotions spiraling out of control. The woman I loved, the woman I had pledged my life to, was carrying my brother's child. How did everything go so wrong? I don't remember much of what happened after I left the restaurant that night. My mind was a blur, consumed by a mixture of rage, betrayal, and disbelief. I wandered the streets for hours, trying to piece together how everything had fallen apart so quickly. The words kept echoing in my head, "It's your brother's." How could Sarah do this to me? How could my own brother? Eventually, I ended up at a bar a few blocks from the restaurant. I wasn't even sure why I went there. Maybe I just needed something to numb the pain, to make sense of the chaos that had become my life. The bartender didn't ask any questions as I ordered whiskey after whiskey, the burn of alcohol doing little to dull the ache in my chest. I stared down at the glass in front of me, my mind replaying the last few months. Looking back, there were signs. Small things that didn't seem important at the time: Sarah's growing distance, her late-night texts that she said were from work, the way she and my brother seemed to laugh at jokes I didn't get when we were all together. I had been so blind. A part of me wanted to march over to my brother's house right then and there, confront him, make him pay for what he'd done. But another part of me, maybe the more rational part, knew that I needed time to process this before I did anything. If I stormed over in my current state, I'd just make things worse. Hours passed, and the bar began to empty out. I wasn't drunk, just numb. The bartender was wiping down the counters, casting me sympathetic looks but leaving me alone. It was a kindness I didn't deserve, not after the disaster my life had become. Finally, I pulled out my phone, hesitating before I dialed my brother, Tyler's, number. The thought of hearing his voice made my skin crawl, but I couldn't avoid this forever. He had to know that I knew. He had to answer for what he'd done. The phone rang 3 times before he picked up. His voice was casual, as if everything was normal, as if my world hadn't just been torn apart. "Hey, Jason. What's up?" I gripped the phone tighter, the anger rising in my throat like bile. "We need to talk," I said, my voice cold, barely controlled. "Now." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, the realization that something was very wrong. Okay. Where are you?" I gave him the name of the bar and hung up before he could say anything else. I didn't want to hear his excuses, his lies. I just wanted answers. 15 minutes later, Tyler walked in. He looked nervous, his eyes scanning the nearly empty bar before they landed on me. For a moment, I saw guilt flash across his face, but he quickly masked it with a neutral expression as he approached. "Jason, what's going on?" he asked, sliding into the booth across from me. I didn't waste any time. "Sarah told me," I said flatly, watching as the color drained from his face. He blinked, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. What did she say?" I leaned forward, my voice low and filled with venom. "She's pregnant, Tyler. And it's your kid." His face went pale. He didn't deny it. He didn't even try to. He just sat there, staring at me, speechless. The silence between us was suffocating. "How long?" I demanded, my fists clenched under the table. "How long has this been going on?" He swallowed hard, his eyes darting away from mine. It was a mistake, Jason. I swear. It only happened a couple of times. I didn't mean for it to." "A mistake?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "You slept with my wife, Tyler. You got her pregnant, and you're calling it a mistake." The other patrons in the bar were starting to stare, but I didn't care. My anger was boiling over, and I wasn't going to hold it in anymore. I know, he said, his voice pleading now. "I messed up, okay? I wasn't thinking. We were both drunk, and..." I slammed my fist down on the table, making him jump. "I don't care if you were drunk. You're my brother. You were supposed to have my back, not stab me in it." Tyler ran a hand through his hair, looking completely panicked. "Look, I know I screwed up, and I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen, I swear. I'll take responsibility for the baby. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this." His words made me want to scream. Responsibility for the baby? Fix this? There was no fixing this. He had destroyed everything. "You don't get it, do you?" I said quietly, my voice filled with cold fury. "You didn't just ruin my marriage. You ruined our family. How am I supposed to trust you after this? How am I supposed to look at you and not see the man who betrayed me in the worst way possible?" Tyler's face crumpled, and for a moment, I saw the guilt and regret in his eyes. But it wasn't enough. Nothing he could say or do would ever be enough. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, Jason." I stood up, my hands shaking as I grabbed my jacket. "Sorry's not going to fix this, Tyler." I walked out of the bar, leaving him sitting there, his face pale and stricken. The bond we'd shared as brothers had been severed in the cruelest way, and I didn't know if it could ever be repaired. As I stepped into the night, the reality of the situation hit me all over again. Sarah was carrying my brother's child. My wife and my brother had betrayed me in the most unforgivable way. And now, I had to figure out where I went from here. After leaving Tyler at the bar, I drove around aimlessly, my mind spinning with everything that had just happened. I didn't want to go home, didn't want to face Sarah, but I knew I couldn't avoid her forever. Eventually, I found myself pulling up to our driveway, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly, the house that used to feel like a sanctuary now seeming like a prison. The lights were on inside, and I could see Sarah moving around through the front window. She was probably waiting for me, dreading this conversation as much as I was. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but nothing could prepare me for what was about to happen. When I walked through the door, she was sitting on the couch, her knees pulled up to her chest, a blanket wrapped around her like a shield. Her eyes were red from crying, but the guilt was still there, heavy in the air between us. "Jason," she began, her voice shaky, but I held up a hand to stop her. "Don't," I said, my voice cold and hard. "Just, don't." I stood there for a moment, just looking at her, the woman I had promised to spend my life with, the woman who had vowed to be faithful, and now here we were, my marriage hanging by a thread because of her betrayal. She looked away, unable to meet my gaze, and the silence in the room was suffocating. "How long?" I finally asked, my voice low, almost a growl. Her eyes flickered up to meet mine for a brief second before she looked back down at her hands. "A few months," she whispered. "It was only a few times, I swear." "A few months. A few times." The words felt like daggers, each one cutting deeper than the last. "And you didn't think to tell me?" I demanded, my voice rising. "You didn't think I had a right to know that my wife was sleeping with my brother?" Tears welled up in her eyes again, but I didn't care. I wasn't in the mood for her tears. I was too angry, too hurt. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said, her voice breaking. "I never meant for this to happen, Jason. I never wanted." "Never meant for it to happen?" I interrupted, my fists clenched at my sides. "You made a choice, Sarah. You chose to betray me, to sleep with Tyler, to carry his child. How can you say you didn't mean for it to happen when you kept making the same decision over and over again?" She flinched at my words, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. All the anger, all the pain I had been holding in, was pouring out of me now, and I didn't care how much it hurt her because she had already destroyed me. "Do you even love me anymore?" I asked, the question hanging in the air like a heavy weight. Or was this all just a lie? Sarah's eyes filled with fresh tears as she shook her head. "Of course I love you, Jason. I never stopped loving you." I let out a bitter laugh, the sound harsh in the quiet room. "You have a funny way of showing it." She stood up from the couch, taking a few steps toward me, her arms reaching out as if to touch me, but I stepped back, putting more distance between us. "Please, Jason," she begged, her voice desperate. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But I love you, and I want to fix this. I want to make things right." I stared at her, the woman I had once loved so deeply, and for the first time, I realized I didn't know if I could ever love her the same way again. The betrayal was too deep, the wounds too fresh. "You can't fix this, Sarah," I said quietly, my voice hollow. "How are we supposed to move forward when every time I look at you, I'll see him? How am I supposed to trust you again?" Her tears were flowing freely now, and she dropped to her knees in front of me, sobbing uncontrollably. "Please, Jason. Please don't leave me. I made a mistake, but I don't want to lose you. I'll do anything, to make it right." I looked down at her, this broken woman who had shattered my heart, and I felt nothing but emptiness. There was no satisfaction in seeing her like this, no relief in her tears. All I felt was the cold, numbing realization that my marriage, the life we had built together, was over. "I need time," I said, my voice void of emotion. "I can't do this right now." She looked up at me, hope flickering in her eyes. "Time? So you're not leaving me? You'll give us a chance?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Instead, I turned and walked out of the room, out of the house, leaving her sobbing on the floor behind me. The weight of her betrayal was too much to bear, and I didn't know if I could ever come back from it. As I drove away from the house that night, I realized that this wasn't just the end of a chapter in my life. It was the end of the entire book. I stayed with a friend for a few days after I walked out that night, not ready to face the reality of what my life had become. The weight of Sarah's betrayal was suffocating, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw her with Tyler. I couldn't escape the images, the sickening feeling in my gut whenever I thought about how they had lied to me for months. The life I thought I had was nothing but a carefully constructed lie. My phone buzzed constantly, texts from Sarah, calls from Tyler, even messages from my mom who somehow got wind that something was wrong. But I couldn't face any of them. Not yet. I needed space, time to think, to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. On the third day, I decided I couldn't avoid it anymore. The house was still mine, and I needed to go back, to figure out what the next steps were. Sarah and I needed to talk about what came next, about whether this marriage was even worth saving. As much as I wanted to leave everything behind, part of me still clung to the life we had built together, even if it was all a lie. When I pulled into the driveway, my heart sank. Sarah's car was there, but so was Tyler's. Of all the things I had expected, this wasn't one of them. What was he doing here? I got out of the car, my fists clenching instinctively. I had been avoiding my brother, not ready to deal with his pathetic excuses or his guilt-ridden apologies, but now there was no avoiding it. The front door was slightly ajar, and as I walked in, I could hear voices, Sarah's and Tyler's, coming from the living room. My blood boiled. The audacity of them, sitting in my house, talking like they hadn't blown my entire life to pieces. I walked in, and they both froze when they saw me. Sarah's face was pale, her eyes wide with shock and guilt. Tyler looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world, but he didn't move. He couldn't run from this. What the hell is going on? I asked, my voice cold and sharp. Sarah stood up quickly, as if she had been caught doing something wrong. Jason, I didn't know you'd be back so soon. We were just talking. Talking? I scoffed, glaring at her. That's rich. What exactly do you two have left to talk about that hasn't already destroyed everything? Tyler stood too, holding his hands up defensively. Jason, man, look, I'm sorry. I know this is a mess, but we needed to figure some things out. I came here to talk to Sarah, to see if we could, handle this like adults. Handle this like adults? I took a step toward him, my anger bubbling to the surface. You slept with my wife, Tyler. You got her pregnant. And now you're standing in my house telling me you want to handle this like adults. Tyler swallowed hard, clearly trying to keep his composure. I'm trying to make things right. I don't want to fight with you. I know I messed up, but we have to figure out how to move forward from here. Sarah stepped between us, her hands raised in a plea for peace. Jason, please. We just want to talk. We're trying to figure out how to handle the baby. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. The baby. The one thing that changed everything, the one reminder that would always stand between us, no matter what. What about the baby? I asked, my voice quieter now, the anger replaced with a hollow ache. What are you two planning? You're going to raise it together? Play house while I'm left standing on the sidelines, watching my wife and my brother raise a child that should have been mine. Sarah's face crumpled with guilt, and Tyler couldn't meet my eyes. We're still figuring it out, Sarah said softly, her voice shaking. But I don't want to lose you, Jason. I don't want this to end like this. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. How do you think this ends, Sarah? You think we can just go back to the way things were? That I can just forget that you betrayed me with my own brother? That I can watch you carry his child and pretend everything's fine? Tears filled her eyes again, but I didn't feel any sympathy this time. I was too tired, too broken. I still love you, Jason, she whispered, her voice trembling. I made a mistake, but I love you. I don't want to lose you. I stared at her, trying to find some trace of the woman I had fallen in love with, but all I saw was a stranger. The love we had, the trust we built, it was gone, shattered by the weight of her betrayal. I can't do this, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. I can't be with you, Sarah. Not after everything that's happened. She sobbed, collapsing onto the couch, her face buried in her hands. Tyler just stood there, looking helpless, like a man who knew he had destroyed everything but couldn't fix it. I'm filing for divorce, I said, my voice steady, even as my heart felt like it was being ripped out of my chest. You and Tyler can figure out your lives without me. Sarah didn't respond, her sobs the only sound in the room. Tyler opened his mouth to say something, but I cut him off with a look. I don't want to hear it, Tyler. Just get out. Both of you. I need you gone. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the house again, my heart heavy, but a strange sense of finality settling over me. I had made my decision, and there was no turning back now. I drove around aimlessly after leaving the house, unsure of where to go or what to do next. The weight of my decision to end my marriage, to walk away from the life I had built with Sarah, hung heavily on me. But at the same time, there was a strange sense of relief, like I was finally taking control of my own life again. No more lies. No more pretending. The next few weeks were a blur. I found a small apartment across town and moved in as soon as I could. It was nothing like the home I had shared with Sarah, but it was mine. For the first time in a long time, I had my own space, free from the suffocating weight of betrayal. Sarah and Tyler respected my wishes and didn't try to contact me again after I told them to leave. I hired a lawyer and filed for divorce, making it clear that I wanted as little contact with them as possible. Tyler offered to talk, to make things right, but I couldn't stomach the idea of sitting down with him again. There was nothing to say. He had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The divorce process was messy, as they always are. We had to untangle our finances, sell the house, and figure out how to divide our belongings. I let Sarah keep most of it. I didn't want the reminders of our life together. The only thing I really fought for was my peace of mind. There were moments when I questioned my decision. Late at night, alone in my new apartment, I would think about what life would have been like if things had been different. If Sarah hadn't cheated. If Tyler hadn't betrayed me. If we had never gone down this path. But those thoughts always ended the same way, with the realization that I couldn't change the past, and there was no going back. I started to rebuild my life, slowly but surely. Work became my escape, something I could throw myself into to avoid thinking about everything that had happened. My coworkers, who had always been more like acquaintances, became friends. They didn't know the full story, but they knew enough to understand that I was going through something difficult. One night, a few months after the divorce was finalized, I found myself at a bar with some of those coworkers. It wasn't the type of place I usually went to, but I needed a distraction. The lights were dim, and the sound of people talking and laughing filled the air, drowning out my own thoughts. As I sat at the bar, nursing a drink, I felt someone sit down next to me. I glanced over and saw a woman, maybe in her mid-30s, with dark hair and a warm smile. "Rough day?" she asked, raising an eyebrow as she took a sip of her drink. I let out a bitter laugh. "You could say that." She smiled sympathetically. "I've had a few of those myself. Want to talk about it?" I didn't usually open up to strangers, but something about her felt safe. Maybe it was the way she seemed genuinely interested, or maybe it was just the alcohol lowering my defenses. Either way, I found myself telling her the whole story, about Sarah, Tyler, the betrayal, the divorce. She listened quietly, nodding along as I spoke. When I finished, she let out a low whistle. "Wow," she said. "That's a lot." "Yeah," I agreed, swirling the ice in my glass. "It's been a hell of a year." She was quiet for a moment before speaking again. "You know, I went through something similar a few years ago. My husband left me for my best friend. It's hard, but it gets better. You find yourself again." Her words hit me harder than I expected. "You find yourself again." I realized in that moment that I had lost a part of myself in all of this, in the betrayal, the anger, the pain. I had let it consume me, define me. But I didn't want to be that person anymore. "Thanks," I said, offering her a small smile. "That actually helps." We spent the rest of the evening talking, about life, about love, about starting over. It wasn't romantic, and there were no expectations. It was just two people, both a little broken, finding comfort in each other's company. As the night went on, I felt a strange sense of hope. For the first time since Sarah had shattered my world, I started to believe that maybe I could move on. That maybe there was a future for me beyond the pain. When I left the bar that night, I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't feel betrayed. I just felt ready. Ready to let go of the past. Ready to stop letting Sarah and Tyler control my emotions. Ready to start living again. And as I walked through the quiet streets, the cool night air filling my lungs, I realized something important. I wasn't defined by what had happened to me. I wasn't just the man whose wife had cheated on him with his brother. I was more than that. And it was time to figure out who I was going to be next.